DM tip number 1, run a session 0, and if needed, run a mid-campaign refresher to check in. And we talk a lot about running session 0 on the Speak in Common podcast, and I do think it's extremely important, but once you've got session 0 locked in, everyone's savvy with your house rules, everybody knows what the expectations of the campaign are, it's always good to check in about halfway through the campaign to make sure that everybody is still in tune with how the culture of the table is intended to play out, or what homebrew or house rules are in play at the table, and just check in, see if you can garner any feedback or answer any questions from your players. Always a good option. DM tip number 2, and this is one of my favorites that I created and I use regularly at the table. Buy identical D20s, one for each player in your campaign, and hand them out as inspiration. What I do is I have 5 clear blue swirl D20s that are my inspiration D20s. And when I'm awarding inspiration to my players, I actually physically hand them the D20, and when they use that inspiration, they hand it back to me. It's a good way for me to track who at the table has inspiration, and it's a good reminder for them to know that they've got a D20 in the pocket as well. Another DM tip, jot down a few notes about the voicing and characteristics of each major NPC that you have in your campaign. For me, this is race, gender, class, and then some notes about characters that I might emulate for their voice specifically. This lets me very quickly recall a voice, pattern, and behaviors for NPCs that may not have shown up in the game for a long time, so that when my characters interact with them down the line, that there's some consistency there and some fluidity. It makes them feel much more real and lived in. DM tip number 4, don't plan for a specific outcome. Rather, plan for actions and effects of a situation. Otherwise, you risk railroading your players and trying to press them into what you think would or should happen. If you have a better sense of organically how things will react and bob and weave in a campaign setting, then it gives you the flexibility to again create that lived-in, organic, real-world feel about how an environment and the people in it would react to the player's actions. DM tip number 5 this week, one that's near and dear to my heart and tends to be fairly contentious in the community. Prepare and plan for your session for as long and as in-depth as you find enjoyable. For me, campaign prep is part of the fun. I'll spend 6 to 8 hours preparing for a session, and a lot of people kind of look down on that, but for me, that's some of the most fun time for me, is when I'm plotting and writing and mapping and painting. All that stuff I consider part of game prep, and that's really kind of my me time. I enjoy it a lot. Why wouldn't I want to spend more than a few hours doing that week to week? So to each their own, of course. For me, there's a lot of fun in that. For you, if it's just, an hour tops and then you want to get into the game, then it's really about what's enjoyable to you. So when it comes to game prep and DM prep, go as far, as long, or as quick and short and shallow as you want, as long as it's enjoyable for you. Take your time. Think about crafting a wonderful world and objectives and hooks for your players to enjoy. And then when you get to the table, you get to sit back and relax with whatever level of prep is comfortable for you. All right, next we're jumping into a few player tips this week. Player tip number 1, there are many ways to take an enemy out of a fight. Restraining or grappling might not be as cool as landing a killing blow, but it can still take an enemy out of the fight and give your party a fighting chance to survive in other ways. Now, restraining is actually an effect of the grapple feature, but you can grapple, you can throw, you can hold a door closed, you can lift a gate, you can tie a rope around someone. There are a lot of ways where you can be creative and clever in the action economy during combat that might actually take an enemy out of the fight even faster than bringing them down to 0. I remember there was this one time in a campaign I was playing through Lost Mines of Phandelver, and my orc warrior did nothing during the first part of the fight other than hold a door closed, which kept 5 or 6 zombies on the other side from entering the fight, allowing my party enough time to clear up the 1 or 2 creatures that they were fighting at the time. So in doing that for 3 rounds, I was able to issue successful athletics checks to keep the door closed, and then when they were all ready, stood back and let the wave come in so that we could bottleneck them in the door. It's just clever use of the environment and seeing in other ways how you can help your party rather than just hack and slash. Number 2, player tip. I think this is something we also learned in Lost Mines of Phandelver. Don't use your face to check for traps. Don't forget to check around, observe, look around, get some feedback from your DM before you charge into a room. You never know, you might save yourself, your party members from a collapsing wall or a buzzsaw trap or bear trap or a falling pit, anything or all of the above. Make sure that you're checking around and be aware of your environment. Your DM should be able to help you play with that and understand what some of the potential pitfalls, no pun intended, exist for you room to room. Number 3 player tip kind of ties back to one of the early tips I made for DMs as well. Make sure that you keep accurate notes and session logs. Trust me, your players and your DM will thank you. It's always nice to have that one chronicler at the table who's really good at writing down, quest objectives and story hooks, PC names, and things that you need to come back to over time, because not everything is linear or should be. And oftentimes you'll want to recall those things to unlock specific objectives or side quests that might exist in the campaigns you're playing. So if you're that type of person, you like the organization and the meticulous note-taking, it will be valuable to everybody at some time. Or at least have someone in your party take the Keen Mind feature where you can force the DM to tell you things that you forget.